Good evening, and welcome to another episode of Tales from the Darkness. Gather round and try to stay in the light. Some of the others from the dark aren't quite as civil as I am, and I hate cleaning up that mess. Black and White Humanoids from Lushant Valkyrie 42. I've never seen these, but my best friend continues to see them in places connected to me. The first time she saw it, we were walking to my apartment after a night out. I was pretty tipsy, but she was the designated driver. She parked, and then as we walked by my car, she went quiet and grabbed my arm to make me walk faster. Once we got to my apartment, she told me she saw something crouching by my car. She said it looked like an emaciated teenager, but had a belly. She couldn't see if it had hands or feet, but it looked like it was crouched down, ready to spring up. Its skin was pale and sickly and white. She said she could see it clearly even though it was very dark. Its face is what scared her most. It had no eyes or mouth or any features she could see, not just because it was dark. It had a black band where the eyes would be. She said it wasn't a shadow over the eyes when I asked her. She told me that she could tell it was part of its face, that it was the color of its skin. My friend isn't religious and didn't believe in supernatural things before this started happening to her. I'm more open to these kinds of things and was terrified by her story. I said a prayer and tried to forget about it. She dismissed it as her seeing things after a long day. The next time she saw it, she was picking me up from my school's ceramic studio, which is located in the basement of the arts building. I spend a lot of time there, so she sometimes comes and hangs out with me while I'm working on my pottery. I was often there late at night because I work long hours as a nanny. She had a feeling that something was watching us from the glaze room where the lights were off. She didn't say anything while it was happening. She just asked if I could wrap it up so we could go. We went up the stairs to the ground floor. There are a lot of stairs, so when you look up the stairway, it goes on a long way. This is where she saw it. She looked up and saw that same featureless face with the black band looking down at her. This is in bright fluorescent lights. She didn't tell me about it until after we were out of the building. Looking back, she was clearly shaken. She asked me to drive her car, which is weird of her because I'm a terrible driver and haven't gotten used to city driving yet. The third time she saw it in broad daylight, crouched near my car again as we were walking to my apartment. This time she told me it was happening as it happened. She looked away as we walked by, and when she looked back, she said it was gone. She says that the first 2 times it happened, she looked away, blinked, and looked back, and it was still there, and that it looked solid, not ephemeral like a ghost. She asked me to do some research about what it was, but I couldn't find anything that matches her experience. I believe her story and would appreciate any ideas about what happened to her. I posted about this a while ago and nobody knew anything. She saw it again recently in another place connected to me. She's never seen anything at her place or her parents' house. We were alone at my grandparents' weekend home in a remote area of the Ozarks on the White River. Previously, all her sightings happened in the city where we went to school. We shared a blunt on the porch and each had a good amount of wine. She was in the living room and I was in my grandmother's suite on the other side of the house taking a bath. When I got out, she was curled up on the couch in my grandmother's room, very shaken, and asked if we could go hang out upstairs for the rest of the night. We slept in the bunk beds that my grandparents had set up for my little brothers, and she kept the lights on all night. In the morning, she told me she saw that same black and white demon in the living room while I was taking a bath. She said it was crouched behind the wood stove, angling towards the wall, which would be the wall shared between the living room and my grandmother's suite, where I was. This really freaked me out, and we decided to leave that day. What is this black and white thing she keeps seeing? Is it haunting me? Has anyone else seen something like this? She says it always looks very physical or corporeal, not like a ghost. She always tries to blink or look away, and when she looks back, it's still there. My friends were stalked by a dog creature at Mount Pisgah from Buri Buri Dance. I'll start off by saying no, this isn't my story, but it was such a crazy encounter that I have since asked each of my friends through the years to recount the events. This happened around the year 2000. About a year after this took place, I started dating one of these friends, and that's when I first heard about this dog-wolf story. I have since asked each friend over the years and miles apart, and they all remember the same encounter. Before my ex was even my boyfriend, let's call him Jay, he and our other friends were about 17 or 18 years old. At that age, I remember it being an adventure to find a place to smoke. Let's go hike to wherever and puff. Ah, good old days when we got away from parents and planned a day around smoking. It was Jay and his best friend B and their girlfriends S and M. The four of them decided to drive to Mount Pisgah, a beautiful wooded area outside of Eugene, Oregon. It's more of a hill, but it's nature in its prime for sure. I've been out there many times growing up, and I know exactly what trail they were on, the main one that connects the parking lot to the river. They had driven B's little white sedan, parked in the parking lot, and then walked to the river. On the way to the river from the lot, there is a very small bridge that crosses a small creek. The group spent the day out there, swimming and puffing and swimming, just being typical Oregonian teens. I can imagine that hunger is what drove them to go home after a few hours, as the sun began to set. Either activity alone is bound to get someone hungry, let alone both. So they walked along the well-worn main dirt path to the parking lot. The path has since been paved according to Google Maps. It doesn't take but 20 minutes or so for them to get back to the little footbridge by the parking lot that they had crossed when they hiked in. When they reached this small footbridge near the parking lot, B looked out into the vast field between them and the wooded mountain, and noticed a huge dog near the tree line, about 100 yards away. They all later described it as the biggest dog they had ever seen. The dog was just sitting there, not looking scary, just looking like a humongous friendly doggy. It was starting to get dark, but from M&J's description, and the drawing they did for me later in 2005, it was very shaggy and furry. My friends continued to walk across this small wooden bridge, and one of the girls screamed. The big dog was now on its hind legs, standing much closer than when they had seen it just a couple of seconds earlier. It had traversed most of the large field in the seconds it took them to get across this 10-foot bridge. Whatever this thing was, it was fast, quiet, and stealthy. My four friends ran to the car, and they had the classic cliché, "I can't get the key in," because B was fumbling madly for the keys. At this point, the dog was standing on its hind legs at the very edge of the parking lot, looking at them. Still had the dog face, still had the dog body, standing up. They never saw it walking, whether it was on all four or just two of the legs. It was like every time they looked up, it was just standing there, closer. As Jay had said, every time they looked up, he was closer but not moving. All of them recounted how surreal it was to see a dog standing on its hind legs. I don't know if it ran for a few ticks and then stood up again at intervals in the field, but that's the way they describe it. Many times I asked them, "Are you sure it wasn't a bear?" No, it definitely was a dog standing on hind legs. A big dog that was stalking them. Also, this is Lane County, Oregon, in the year 2000. There are few, if any, bears out there. It would be odd, but then again, I wasn't there. They got into the car and sped off, leaving the Pisgah dog to his own business. I've never had a reason to doubt any of their stories. In fact, S doesn't like to talk about the incident at all, because it's too creepy for her to recall. Monster in the Woods, from Ray223. This happened when I was probably 7 or 8. I was sleeping with my mother in her room because my dad worked night shift. It was a warm summer night, so we had the windows open. Our house is right next to the woods. I remember waking up to the piercing scream of what sounded like maybe a bobcat or some other similar animal. My mother and I both bolted upright at the sound, and a second later, my older sister darts into the room and jumps on the bed. Then we hear why it's screaming. Whatever had hold of this animal was big, and it was snorting and chewing as the animal it was killing screamed for its life. Now, I've done a lot of reflecting as an adult on this night, and it's still a topic that pops up when we are talking about freaky crap. The only way I can describe the sounds is similar to a big boar snorting the way it did. The power behind the snorts made me think it was a bear or something with a massive lung capacity. After about a minute of sitting frozen on the bed, we made our way to the window to peek outside and see if we could catch a glimpse of what the hell was eating this animal. We couldn't see anything in the darkness of the woods, but we could hear clear as day the chomping of the predator and the snapping of the bones of the prey. It was just past the tree line, maybe 20 yards away, but it was so loud it could have been directly below the window, and it lasted for a solid 10 minutes. When it finally stopped chewing, that was it. We never heard it walk away. It was like it killed something, ate it, and disintegrated into thin air. Or stood there watching us. It was silent, and so were we for a long time, just listening to nothing, too afraid to even breathe. It's an eerie feeling when the forest is silent. You could have heard a pin drop. This thing had to be huge. I cannot stress this enough. A bear we would have heard roaming about the brush afterward. Same for any other large predator like a mountain lion, and there are no boars in Pennsylvania. It didn't sound like any of those things, though. I have since seen and heard the likes of those animals, and nothing I have ever heard sounds even remotely close to what we heard that night. But that's not even the weirdest part. The next morning, we told my dad what had happened, and we all went scouring the area where we heard it take place. Just inside the tree line, there wasn't a single twig out of place. No evidence of a scuffle, no prints, no carcass, not even a drop of blood. Absolutely nothing. With the amount of brush and how large this thing sounded, there should have definitely been some kind of remnants of what we heard. There was nothing. So what the hell? Was it a ghost bear? Bigfoot? A goddamn werewolf? I really couldn't tell you. But I have never ventured too far into the woods after that night. Weird things happen in the woods at night. A piece of advice: when the forest goes silent, make like a tree and leave. Kinda weird experience, from Anonymous. Not really scary, but kinda weird, and the whole family is confused. So this happened to my cousin that lives like 10 minutes outside of our small town in southern Wisconsin. She lives in a large split-level house next to a small lake in the upper level of the house with her 2 sons and her parents in the level below. The house was built into a hillside, so the top of the hill is even with her level, and the bottom of the hill is even with the lower level. She has had 4 chickens living in a coop outside around 40 feet from the front door for about 2 years now. Nothing weird has ever happened before. Now there are foxes and coyotes around, as well as other typical wildlife, but no foxes have been seen in the area for years. One morning, about 3 weeks ago, she went out to grab the eggs and found all 4 chickens missing from their coop. The wire door had been torn open, but no feathers or blood, just gone. She was understandably upset because she loved those chickens like children, but accepted that sometimes things like this happen out in the country. Well, about a week after that, she woke up in the middle of the night to a scratching sound at the wood door and her dog barking. She got up to check and found one of her chickens pecking and scratching at the door. She brought it inside and put it in the rabbit cage, and put the rabbit in a baby pack-and-play for the night, and went back to sleep. Over the next week or so, the rest of the chickens showed up, one by one at the door, all pecking to be let in. They all looked completely fine and were not injured in any way. She knew she couldn't keep them inside forever, so she put the 4 of them in a large dog kennel just outside the door on the porch. The kennel has slightly rusty latches, so it's pretty difficult to open even for an adult. They stayed in this kennel for about a week, until she could get the original coop door fixed. About 4 days ago, she woke up in the morning, once again going to check on the chickens in the porch, but instead of finding them in the kennel, she found a puddle of chicken blood bones and feathers on the porch, and the kennel door open. Like I said, this kennel wasn't easy to open, and the chickens had apparently been eaten right there on the porch. What confuses us is, what did it? How did it open the kennel? And how did it do it without alerting the dog or the chickens making enough noise to wake up 3 people sleeping only 15 feet away? Once again, not really scary, just a weird story that I thought I'd share. Creature in Pisgah Forest, from Anonymous. For a bit of backstory, I work the graveyard shift in the North Carolina mountains. Working these dark hours kinda leaves limited things to occupy my time on my days off. Normally, I just go out driving or hiking in the dark, if I don't have a video game I want to play or a movie I want to watch. With this hobby, I often come across unusual things in the darkness. I've experienced things I can't forget, or hear things when I'm alone that make me want to faint. They all range from normal scary to the downright terrifying paranormal, like this story. This happened about 2 weeks ago. I've been scared to talk about it because every time I do, when the dark comes, there's always a noise or a bad feeling that comes to me and whomever I'm around. But I'll talk about that more later. Well, it was my night off. I was getting kinda bored with laying around watching YouTube videos while my fella slept. So, like most weekends, now that it's getting warmer, I decided to go out for a drive. It's about 1 a.m. and cloudless, so I head up to the parkway like normal. It's bound to be a beautiful drive. Nope, it's closed. Well, dang, where do I go now, I think? Oh, Pisgah Forest. I haven't been there since high school. Perfect, an adventure, and off I drive. It's about 3 a.m. by the time I get to the entrance of the forest. It's already looking pretty foreboding. The entrance is smack in the middle of a tourist tubing, ice cream, and souvenir haven. All brightly lit parking lots and cute signs. But the entrance is completely the opposite. It's a long, straight road with absolutely no lights disappearing into the night. Only campers go up there after dark. I don't think much of it. It's nighttime. Of course it looks pretty scary. Everything looks scary in the dark. And up I drive. Everything is pretty normal for a while. I pass by turnoffs for picnics and campgrounds, all dark. But the higher I climb up the mountain, the more anxious I feel. Something isn't right. I'm normally fine in the night. It's my time. But something just feels off. I keep pushing on. The winding road climbs higher and higher. Forest is all around me, thick and serene. The air is warm and smells so good and musty. The only light around is from my headlights, but I can't shake the bad feeling. I try to ignore it, thinking maybe it's 'cause I can't see the moon, like when I go on the parkway. Yeah, that's it. That's gotta be it. But as the climb gets steeper, the more scared I get. My chest is tight and becoming painful, but I keep going, just trying to ignore it. I'm passing the waterfalls, hearing the water roaring out of sight. I should be relaxing, but I can't. After about an hour and a half, I notice the turnoffs are few and far between. I haven't passed any in a while. The pain in my chest is alarming me, and I'm considering heading back down. Suddenly, I smell something unusual. You ever remember being little and your parents having that particular smell that you remember? Like a perfume or a cologne they might wear that you immediately recognize into your adult years as them. Well, my dad was a factory worker and a smoker, so from a young age he always smelled of motor oil, harsh metal, coffee, and cigarettes. An odd combination, but it's him. And that's the smell I smelt, in the middle of the woods, with nothing but trees and clear air around. I smelled my dad. It was subtle, but I got the hint. I need to turn my butt around and go home, now. I drove onwards till I found a safe place I could do a K-turn. Around a tight turn, I found a good spot away from the guardrails and initiate the maneuver. Right as I got my car straightened back out, I stopped dead. The smell of rot had flooded through my open window, and there, inches from my front bumper, was a creature. It was crouched down, looking at the dirt. The body, it wasn't right. It looked like a big, hairy dog crouching on all fours, but the legs, they were too long to be a normal dog. My eyes moved up to its head. A human head. Long, dark hair covering a face I couldn't see. But its eyes, I could see them, and they met mine. Red-orange glowing back at me. My heart felt like it was going to stop, and tears started filling my eyes. I hadn't been this scared in my whole life. My heart felt like it was going to stop, and the horrible smell was suffocating. The creature started to move. I don't know what happened. It was like my body flipped a switch. I wasn't thinking anymore. I didn't feel anything. I just stomped on the gas pedal, veered around the creature, and sped off down the mountain. I feel like I should have clipped it with my car. It was so close, but I don't remember feeling like I connected with anything. I don't remember anything up until my phone rang, long after I left the forest. It was my twin. She felt like something was wrong and had been trying to get a hold of me for half an hour. I drove to her house and explained the whole thing, waiting for the sun to come up. This has been one of the most terrifying experiences that has ever happened to me alone so far. And every time I tell someone about it, something unexplained happens. When I told my twin, that night she heard some banging on her closet door, with no one and nothing inside of it. When I told my parents, my mother saw some red eyes in the woods when she went out to smoke. When I told my fella the next evening, we both heard a crash outside, but when we looked, there was nothing amiss. Then, when I was leaning beside the window, I saw the curtain move in one spot. I felt a breath behind me. I flipped and hid on the other side of the room until morning. We're on the second floor. I don't know if it's the same creature and it somehow followed me across counties, or something else, warning me not to talk about it. So I don't know if anything will happen after I post this. I hope not. I still go out driving at night, and it's actually my night off. But I think I'll just stay home tonight. Play it safe. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe if you want to hear more. Don't forget you can also listen to these stories on Spotify, link in the description down below. If you would like to hear your story narrated, you can send it to storiesofdarkness55@gmail.com. And as always, pleasant dreams.